Okay, this has been an absolutely insane week in the conservative political sphere. Steven Crowder, who not long ago announced that he and Blaze Media were parting ways, just went nuclear on potential podcast host The Daily Wire. In the back and forth between Crowder and Daily Wire CEO Jeremy Boring, phone calls and preliminary negotiations were leaked by Crowder, all in the name of safeguarding the future generation of content creators. In response to this, Daily Wire host Ben Shapiro and Candace Owens launched lengthy personal attacks, deriding Crowder as unethical, a fraud, and as an overall bad person. Now, I'm not really sure how I feel about the whole thing. In all honesty, I've given both money to the Daily Wire and to Steven Crowder via The Blaze, so I'm not really inclined to take a side on this. I can understand the merits of arguments for and against both parties involved. My biggest takeaway, however, is that I feel the Daily Wire made a bad faith offer to Crowder regarding his fees. The offer had penalties of up to $100,000 if Crowder missed filming a show, which isn't completely unfair given that the Daily Wire was offering $12.5 million per year. However, this doesn't even address the fact that they could also fine him if he were to become demonetized or censored by one of the major big tech platforms. To me, this is extremely disingenuous, as Crowder already has a history of being demonetized by YouTube, the platform that he still maintains his largest presence on. Reality is, agreeing to those terms would be like shooting himself in the foot. No considerations were made for the number of new subscribers he'd be bringing with him as well. I mean, let's be real. Ad revenue from YouTube is a drop in the bucket compared to what Daily Wire would make in new membership fees. So as the Twitterverse erupted between two sides that seemed way too eager to fight to the death for the sake of millionaires, a far more interesting, and if I do say so myself, concerning storyline has emerged. While Eliza Bleu may not be the household name that Steven Crowder or Ben Shapiro are, I would argue that her social influence is equal to any political podcaster. Most people that recognize this woman's name know her as the anti-trafficking advocate that skyrocketed to internet fame thanks to Twitter Spaces and high follower count profiles like Elon Musk retweeting her. Her story is like so many others that, at the age of 17, got involved with the wrong people and ended up a victim of trafficking and sexual abuse. It's worth noting that although she is now extremely influential and in a position to hold her abusers accountable, she has never named any names. She has her own podcast, speaks as an advocate for other survivors, petitions for changes to content moderation on Twitter, and makes appearances on shows such as Timcast IRL. She's even been interviewed by fellow YouTubers Chrissy Mayer and Brittany Venti. Only now, Brittany Venti's been yeeted off of Twitter for asking Eliza to clarify information that has recently come to light. For the sake of keeping this video short and to the point, I'll mainly be using Twitter threads and will be linking all of them in the description down below. The whole situation was brought to my attention about 3 weeks ago when journalist Michael Tracy began inquiring about Eliza's story of being trafficked. At the time, I only knew her name and had a vague idea about her background. Oh man, my eyes have been opened so much wider after the last 24 hours. Starting with Michael's post from January 2nd. Quote, "Was curious what made this person a human trafficking expert. It's a long, hazy tale of allegedly being trafficked by a high-profile musician into what she calls the game, which then she voluntarily left and re-entered only to be trafficked again by a, quote, high-profile athlete. She says her memory is very spotty, which must be why there's virtually zero independent verification anywhere of her extravagant, salacious claims. As per usual, facts and precision replaced with endless recitations of therapeutic trauma jargon and appeals to survivor status. She tells of many tumultuous personal relationships, interspersed with being trafficked apparently into her 30s. Eventually, she says, I walked away. I always said I would leave the life if I met somebody that I truly loved. Unclear what, quote, the life and, quote, the game mean exactly. I normally would have zero interest in the messy details of somebody's personal life, but she uses this messy tale to endow herself with expert authority as a public policy advocate. She also seems to have some sort of informal advisory role with Twitter now on safety team issues. Now, this is where my personal interest actually comes into play. Much like Michael Tracy's original Twitter post, I myself too am questioning how she has gotten into this position of authority on Twitter. But when YouTuber Brittany Venti simply inquired with Eliza as to the contents of a Twitter thread that's been around since December 26th of last year, it resulted in Brittany Venti getting locked out of her account and getting a response from Eliza claiming that she will take legal action against her for, quote, sharing a non-consensual image. The image in question is from a YouTube video in which Back in 2016, Eliza Bleu, at that time who was known as Eliza Knows, one of her many aliases, was doing a music video with world star hip hop. Now, it's not for me, it's not something that I would seek out to watch on YouTube, but it's one of these videos that you can imagine is very much suggestive, borderline softcore, if you get what I'm saying, where there's not much left to the imagination. Whether or not she was trafficked during this time period, we have no proof of. Now, in this thread by Manuel De Guzman, who, to be honest, I have my own concerns about the veracity of his claims, but he has done an awful lot of research on this, so I will give him a shout out in this video. He has put together a lot of different timelines and facts that go along to support that, if nothing else, Eliza, if she's not outright lying, is definitely mixing up her stories, and it's very concerning for somebody who is a supposed advocate for the abused, trafficked, and those who have been taken advantage of, that you can't even keep your own story straight, especially for somebody who's in this position of authority. This is from December 26th. Last year, someone compiled the MCR story, as in My Chemical Romance, to show Eliza Bleu was a crazy stalker of the band, threatened to commit suicide. The trafficking story is just made up entirely, probably to get back years later at MCR band members. Why she doesn't name anyone. It gets weirder. Eliza Bleu was on TV show Blind Date, which ran from 1999 to 2006. On that show from 2006, Eliza claimed to be age 21 and talked about sex. Yet a year later, she was 17 and being trafficked. It's not adding up, is it? 2006, Blind Date, 21 years old. 2007, My Chemical Romance emo girl, MySpace, Stickum, and getting trafficked. 2016, refusing sex for $150,000. 2022, 15 years ago at 17, I was trafficked, setting the date at 2007. See the issue? Continuing on. The story doesn't add up. She was an internet star in 2007 and it never came up. Then was a world star hip-hop girl. It would make more sense if the trafficking happened in the 2016 era. Now to her actual story, groomed at age 15 at the Vans Warped Tour for 2 years by an unnamed photographer. Went to LA with photographer and moved before she was 18, got into drugs and was sold. Now we have a good timeline for everything. My Chemical Romance only played the Vans Warped Tour from 2004 to 2005, putting her story at 2005 for being 15 years old, yet somehow in 2006 she was on Blind Date, claimed to be 21 years old. And it just goes on and on and on. And there are more parts that I'll bring up, but for example here, she even tried to get on American Idol. Yet 11 years ago, she was 29 in 2011, making her 17 years old in 2005 claim false yet again. Like, does she not know how the internet works? How could someone live so many lives and lies all at once? You can even compare the way that she speaks in her video from 2016 in which she talks about refusing a $150,000 offer for sex with her voice on her podcast now, and she doesn't even sound like the same person. She's also gone by in 2009 Eliza Seep, also known as, especially on the internet, as Eliza Cuts. She had been all the buzz at the Chicago American Idol audition for season 9, something I didn't know. There's also a conflicting story about whether or not she is or is not the daughter of a former lieutenant governor. This is one of those stories that's probably going to get crazier as people dig further and further into it. But here's where I want to leave it. This is a person that has advocated for absolute freedom of speech, who has now weaponized her relationship with Twitter to silence both Brittany Venti and the quartering on Twitter. She even claims to have 2 anonymous witnesses that are prepared to testify against Andrew Tate in his supposed human trafficking scandal, but if she herself is lying about her own experiences, that shoots the shit out of any anonymous source she brings forward. Ultimately, we might never know the whole story. But what is certain is that between corrupt politicians and grifting e-celebrities, the right-wing political movement needs to clean house ASAP. Thanks for watching, and please feel free to share your thoughts down below. As always, like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.